by the way, I just have to preface this video by saying that I haven't slept a wink at all last night. Like, I was awake the entire night. It was a very stressful and emotional night. So I apologize in advance if my thoughts don't come across that coherent today. I think I'm literally running off adrenaline and whatever else that I can muster up within me to make these videos for you guys today. But after 24 hours of complete and utter radio silence, after Donald Trump decided to bomb the Iranian nuclear sites, meaning that Iran has no longer the capabilities to enrich the 60% uranium even further to making a nuclear bomb, which should be praised and celebrated throughout the entire Western world if you want actual peace. But lo and behold, where was our wonderful spineless Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, when it all mattered? You heard nothing from him. Not a peep. No one could get in contact with him. No one knew where he was. 24 hours of radio silence. In fact, I think it was more than that. I think it was more than like 48 hours of total and utter radio silence, which is an utter shame and an embarrassment for Australia. I made a video about it yesterday, calling him an absolute coward. He's afraid of Trump. The problem we've got here in Australia is not only corrupt leaders, but weak and spineless leaders. Albanese couldn't even muster the guts to show his face at all when Trump made the big decision. You had other leaders like Keir Starmer, for goodness sake, get up and praise Trump and say, we stand with Trump. Where was Albo? Goodness knows. Probably sleeping, or probably, here's the thing. He had a massive bender with his good mate, Dan Andrews, and spent quite a bit of money on the weekend, I heard. Don't quote me on that, right? I'm not here about conspiracy theories, but we saw Albanese and Dan Andrews together in a restaurant with lavish, expensive wine and food. No doubt about it. This is a guy that can, spend a great deal of money at your expense, ladies and gentlemen, I'll have you know, for doing what exactly? Can't even show up when it mattered most. How about that? But, ladies and gentlemen, when he did decide to show up and face the media, how long do you think the press conference was? Do you think it was a strong show of support for Trump? No, it was a groveling, weak, hands and arms, and we stand with Donald Trump. Yes. Our position has always been Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. The guy has lost it completely, ladies and gentlemen. And, well, after his short little rant to the media, to everyone, the nation, addressing the entire nation, we could have been on the precipice of World War III. Don't know that. But where was he? God forbid if it had been like a major announcement for World War III. Albanese's nowhere to be found. Where's Australia? Gee, I don't know. We can't even contact the Prime Minister. Wow. Okay, so what do you do in that case? Gee, I don't know. Someone find Anthony Albanese. Where is he? He's sleeping off his bender with his mate Dan Andrews. Goodness me, what an absolute sham this entire thing was. Here is the 1 minute or so address that Albanese decided to muster up, keeping in mind that it was on a script. Yeah, on a script. How about that? Watch.
The world has long agreed that Iran cannot be allowed to get a nuclear weapon, and we support action to prevent that. That is what this is. The US action was directed at specific sites central to Iran's nuclear program. We don't want escalation and a full-scale war. We continue to call for dialogue and for diplomacy. As I've said for many days now, we are deeply concerned about any escalation in the region, and we want to see diplomacy, dialogue and de-escalation. We've been upfront about the challenge facing the international community, that is, dealing with the threat posed by any Iranian nuclear weapons program and dealing with the risk of regional escalation. And that's why Australia called upon Iran to come to the table and abandon any nuclear weapons program. Iran didn't come to the table just as it has repeatedly failed to comply with its international obligations. We urge Iran not to take any further action that could destabilise the region.
Now, do you think that 1 minute, 13-second speech by Anthony Albanese would have made the Iranian Islamic regime shake in their boots? Oh, Australia urges Iran not to escalate, but to de-escalate, to come to the table. No, Iran's not scared of that. Iran doesn't really care what Anthony Albanese has to say. Why would they? They don't fear them. They don't fear us. Australia is not a sign of strength, man, especially with this guy at the helm. I am in no way a fan at all of Anthony Albanese, and neither are the actual majority of Australians, I'll have you know. What a weak embarrassment to Australia. Not a leader in any way. Took you long enough to come out of hiding and make a statement. Diplomacy, dialogue, and de-escalation. I can hear the mullahs laughing from here. No, Albo, the message is do what Trump says or get the, you know what, blown out of you. Albo just wrapped up his 28-hour meditation on peace and finally emerged to say he's deeply concerned after triple checking with the ABC, his diversity consultant, and the Iranian ambassador. This isn't diplomacy. It's performance art for social media. Yeah, let's show Australia is strong, right? With a 1 minute, 13-second clip that you're fiddling around with your piece of paper. Know how Trump just goes off the cuff? It's because he knows his stuff. Trump is like a lot older than Albo, and Albo can't even not read off a script, man. What does that tell you about strength? Strength of a leader that knows what he's doing. Imagine a phone call to Khomeini between Albo. Oh, wait a minute, Khomeini. I got to get ChatGPT. It's going to write me a script. Give me a second. That's what it looks like. It's performance. It's performance, plain and simple. And to be honest with you, it is a terrible performance at that. And here, ladies and gentlemen, is the icing on the cake when the media asked him questions. Have a watch.
Happy to take questions.
Prime Minister, can you just explain why you've waited until now to explicitly express your support for this action? And is it because you want Australia to remain a non-central player in this conflict?
Well, we aren't a central player in this conflict. That's just a fact. And what we do is we run an orderly, stable government. But I made comments about this in 3 countries over recent days, and my comments today are perfectly consistent with that.
Prime Minister, if I could just ask about, there's a concern from the US around retaliatory action when it comes to sleeper cells in the US. That's something that's been well reported over the last few hours. There's a sense that Iran has the capability to attack European American nationals beyond the US and the Middle East is also what's being reported. Was this discussed today, and what would be your message to Australians who are seeing this sort of thing coming out in terms of any concern about a threat here in Australia?
Well, precisely why we're calling for a de-escalation. And obviously we are opposed to any action against Australians or indeed against anyone else. What we want to see, as President Trump has said, is peace going forward. There's an opportunity for that to occur. Hang on. Whoa.
Thank you, Prime Minister. I'll just add to that. Obviously, there are always risks, not only from escalation in the region, but also potential for risk more broadly. I indicated publicly this morning that I have asked my department to consider whether there's any alteration to travel advice more generally, which we will obviously make sure is up to. Well, we don't discuss what happens.
We don't talk about what we discuss at NSC. Yeah.
Prime Minister, can you confirm or providing details to whether Australia has provided any military support via our bases in the region, or indeed any signals support via our joint facilities here in Australia?
Well, we don't talk about intelligence matters, but we confirm, of course, that this was a unilateral action by the United States.
So the first question to Anthony Albanese was, why haven't you addressed, why is it taking you this long to address the US bombing the Iranian nuclear sites? And Albanese's basically avoided that part of the question and gone, we run a tight ship in Australia. We run a tight government. I've made these comments the last couple of days in 3 countries over. That's good enough for me, all right? And that should be good enough for Australia. No, just because you've made comments 3 countries over, the G20 summit, you've made your position clear somewhat. Like, why couldn't you address the entire nation after Trump? Like, you didn't say Australia stands with Trump's decision to bomb the Iranian nuclear sites. All you've said is Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. So you don't stand with America's involvement. All you stand with is Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. So how are they not going to have a nuclear weapon? Let me just ask that question. America got involved, and quick and precise action. Now, Anthony Albanese doesn't even want to address the question of why he couldn't address the nation of Australia. Let everyone know. Pathetic excuse of a leader, honestly. Absolute shame. Massive, massive shame. Anyway, and also you saw him pass it along very quickly to Penny Wong. Take it over, Penny Wong. So who's actually leading? Albo or Penny Wong? Anyway, that's enough from me, but you guys take care. Be blessed, and I'll see you all in the next video.